We're going to actually talk a little bit about specifically around Australia. So we've just done a bunch of research, some studies in Q3 2025 on Australian enterprise studies. We surveyed around 400 telecoms decision makers across Australia. So essentially that's business owners, head of IT, head of telecoms, C-level kind of executives, the decision makers for the telecoms buying in these different enterprises. Importantly, the majority of the respondents were from organizations over 250, but we maintained a strong cross-section for the small to medium enterprises as well. So what you're going to be seeing here today isn't anecdotal, but it's statistically representative of Australian enterprises and how they're thinking about communications currently. Just a little bit of background on how we do our research there. This slide you can speak to yourself. So our research team are based over in the UK, our analyst team, which obviously Director of Research, Patrick Watson, heads up. And how we do our research is very simple. A lot of planning, consultation, survey operations, and then we move into the report creation. So typically when we do these reports, they are done over roughly around an 8-week window. So one quick note just on the industry mix. Construction, finance, and banking are strongly represented in the data, which isn't a surprise, obviously, to anyone in the room, but manufacturing and retail also feature prominently in some of the studies that we've done. Overall, we capture responses from more than 20 verticals. And why that matters is that because the priorities we're about to talk about, or what I'm about to talk about, aren't isolated to just one sector, okay? So they're systematic. So let's start off with the workforce structure. So the first and most common trend here is that hybrid is not a trend, okay? And that it is actually the default. So about 8% of the organizations report having zero hybrid or remote workers from some of our recent studies, and only around the same proportion are fully remote. So on the end of you'll see the standard deviation there. Which means that proportion, this basically means that half of the Australian workforce now depends on distributed collaboration infrastructure. Yeah, so this isn't a temporary COVID hangover anymore, this is structural. And it directly shapes how our enterprises are communicating. And now we're going to get into some more of the interesting stuff. So we gave the respondents 20 different strategic priorities. And here we obviously spoke a little bit to this earlier in the opening keynote. For micro businesses, you can see here that cost reduction still dominates, and there's no surprise there. Okay, very price sensitive when you're at that smaller scale. But for every other business size category, using AI to drive productivity is the #1 strategic requirement. Number 2, cybersecurity and data compliance. So cost reduction remains important, but it's no longer the primary driver of decision making in the mid-market and enterprises. So this is a major shift. We've also, Australian enterprises are also no longer buying the communications purely to save money. A lot of this is actually around to build, increase productivity and increase that in a secure way. Yeah, so when we asked around the AI side of stuff, if whether AI would benefit an organization over, most of them over the next 3 years, the answer was very pragmatic. So efficiency gains obviously take the lead. And here we can see that things like transcription, summarization, or workforce automation are the key examples here. Then we've got data analytics and insight generation, which is quite funny because that's obviously what we're here to give you guys all today. So you probably could have saved yourself some time in traffic today. No, just kidding. Actually, I reckon Cavell will probably change their catchphrase one day to handmade analytics, because we obviously have so much of that AI stuff coming out. But in this terminology, the data analytics is more focused around error reduction. It's around reduced admin time, and it's more around lower labor intensity. So what we're not seeing, though, is large-scale human replacement. This is augmented. So it's not elimination, yeah? And Australian enterprises view AI as a productive multiplier and not a headcount remover. That's probably one of the main pieces to take away from here. So although AI is becoming more prominent in a lot of workplaces, it's not going to replace the user. It's going to help enhance their productivity. And that nuance obviously really matters here. Now, when we talk a bit about security, security is no longer a defensive position, okay? Basically, we now break security into 5 monetizable layers. So we've got telecom, security, cybersecurity services, fraud prevention, AI analytics, and compliance and data protection. And here's the key point. Security isn't increasingly a trigger for migration. When enterprises switch cloud providers, it's not usually because of feature gaps, it's because of perceived risk exposure. So that changes the competitive dynamic dramatically in this regard. Cool, we'll move on to a bit of the telecom side of stuff. So on average, Australian businesses work with just roughly around 3 telecom suppliers, okay? And larger enterprises use more, which we'd obviously expect, but we're talking about the small to medium, typically use roughly around 3 telecom suppliers. Compared to Europe, Australia actually behaves more like the US. And why is that? It's because with national carriers that cover a lot of the entire country here in Australia. So in Europe, obviously cross-border complexity drives supply sprawl. In Australia, it's consolidation and national scale which reduce it. And this makes integration, not footprint, the key battleground here. This one's a little bit more sobering. So basically, over 80% of the organizations say that they're satisfied with their telecom provider. Only a tiny percentage report dissatisfaction. What that means is that we're operating obviously in a highly competitive and relatively mature market, and there's no widespread pain point waiting to be solved, which means the new wins don't come from disruption alone, they come from differentiation. And when we ask what matters most when selecting a telecommunications provider, the number one is integration capability. Yeah, into collaboration platforms, into CRM systems, contact centers, or into analytics stacks. Pricing remains critical, that's for sure. Product features matter, but integration actually sits at the top. In a hybrid AI-enabled workplace, standalone services don't win anymore. Yeah, and ecosystems or ecosystem fit is what wins. Cool. And here's the opportunity, probably the green works here. So in 2025, nearly 2 million of the Australian cloud users will enter into a new renewal system. Now, most will renew with their existing provider. That makes sense. But when we ask, what the drive migration between, renewal obviously is a big momentum for switching between suppliers, and which creates this opportunity. So when we ask them, what would drive migration between public cloud services or public cloud providers, the top 3, what we can see here, security, reliability, and cost. Does anyone notice what's missing there? Big piece that's missing there? It's the feature innovation, yeah? This tells us something very important, that cloud communications decisions are now driven by risk management and operational fit, so not novelty. So quick little few key takeaways. What does this mean for you guys in the room today? First, Australia is obviously a mature, high-penetrated cloud market. Second there, we can see that AI productivity and security now drive enterprise strategy. So it's not just pure cost reduction. Thirdly, we see satisfaction levels are high, so differentiation must be commercial and structural, not cosmetic. Fourth point here, we mention integration capability is becoming a primary selection filter. And finally, we talk about renewals, not greenfield, are the battleground. So, the market is not shrinking, but growth increasingly comes from displacement and value add layers, yeah? And that requires a very different go-to-market strategy more than 5 years ago. Awesome. Well, I've actually just wrapped that up really, really quick. If you do have any other questions around this sort of enterprise study, come and see Patrick, myself, or Chris. We've done a lot of the work on this particular topic, and we've actually got our research report coming out after this event. So if you do want further information, we can send you a little sample of that.